When we visit the past, we bring our own ideas with us. And when we think about the health of a society, we have our own ideas about what makes a society healthy. And we have our own ideas about what makes it, decline. So I'll give a great example of this because it's, first of all, one of my favorite things. But um, Isaac Asimov wrote this series of books called the Foundation series. And Asimov describes, he came up with this idea of a galactic empire centered on a massive city that he's going to trace its decline, but he's also going to trace the creation of a foundation that will preserve all of the technological and scientific knowledge of the empire uh, before its decline starts and before it falls. And his idea is there's someone who has created a mathematical formula to be able to see the future. And he sees that this way will prevent lots of suffering from humankind because it will preserve all of the great technology and skills that the empire has. And he measures the baseline of before decline as being able to have atomic power for all of your electricity and being able to participate readily in intergalactic, like interspatial travel, where you can
Okay.
move at the speed of light between planets. And he's writing in about 1950, right? And so this is the future, right? In 1950, progress represents atomic power, and it represents ever increasing speed and capacity to travel into space. Um, the biggest rocket the United States ever launched into space was the Saturn V, and it last launched, I think, in 1973. We reached the peak for atomic power generation also in the 1970s, right before Three Mile Island. And all of those things have been declining for the last 40 to 50 years. So by Asimov's measure in 1950, we are in a 50-year period of decline, right? In what he saw as progress in 1950, we have invested in other things. But Asimov also describes this galactic empire for 10,000 years into the future as having paper newspapers, as having really primitive computers. What he envisioned as progress isn't the progress that we embraced. Uh, and so, by Asimov's measure, we've been in decline for 50 years. By the measures that we chose, we invested in information technology. We invested in, we created the internet. We invested in creating better computers. We invested in, taking what would be an entire building of computing power in 1950 and putting it on our watch. Um, this is what we chose to do, and those are choices. And it's possible that 50 years from now, people will look at those choices and say those were good choices. It's also possible that 50 years from now, people will say, wait, Asimov was right. We did all of these things and we could have fixed climate change by making atomic power safe. We could have fixed overpopulation by figuring out how to travel to other planets. It's possible that the story people will tell in 2060 or 2070 is a story of decline, where we made bad choices in like the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s that brought about a really terrible future for humanity. It's also possible that we would say, look, atomic power is not a great solution. Um, Interspatial travel is not something we are able to do. And so what we did is we embraced the technologies that we thought were best, and they were best. But I think this is the challenge that we have when we talk about decline. We're in the middle of it. And so we might be right in identifying problems in our society, but we also might identify the wrong problems. We also might embrace a future that isn't the right future. And it's hard for us to know what our story is going to be. It's hard for us to know what this moment is going to lead to. And this is why we have to be really cautious. There are things we can, of course, identify, like saying, bridges are collapsing. That's not good under any circumstances. We should fix them. And I don't think anybody at any point in history would say, yeah, let the bridges collapse. That'll be better for us. Um, but there are other things where it's much more complicated to figure out what the big picture is, what the consequences of a long-term process of development will be, and what should we do in response. And I think the Asimov question is a key example of that. Who is right? Is Asimov right that the future he saw in 1950 actually is a good future? Or did we make the right choices in going in a different direction?